I've been thinking lately about what it means to build something that functions but doesn't quite make sense in its essence. A system that performs beautifully, does exactly what it says on the box, and still manages to feel like a betrayal. It's like a date with a pretty girl that's going really well, until she mentions she collects human skins, and that I need to be more careful walking home because Mercury is in retrograde. Both remarks are total deal breakers for me, both of them. Machine learning sort of like that. It's often marketed as a tool to help us make better decisions. It classifies, clusters, recommends, detects, scores, predicts, all to optimize a process, a preference, or a person. What it really does though, at least consciously, is ask why the task exists in the first place. You train a model, it learns the rules of the world, or at least the rules of your dataset's version of the world. Extremely limited, by the way. Then it tells you what's likely to happen next. Not what should happen, not what you want to happen, just what's likely, quietly, without opinion or intuition. And yet most organizations don't mind. They just want the accuracy to go up and the loss function to go down. That's the arrangement. And for the most part, it's hard to complain. Most of the time it works. In that sense, machine learning is deeply absurd. Most machine learning projects at the organizational level are an exercise in coping. They begin not with a question but a hunch. Can we automate this? Not should we, nor why has it not worked before, or what the actual problem is here. Just can we? You feed the system thousands or millions of rows and it tells you which customers might churn, which ads might convert, which employees might leave. In a literal sense, machine learning gives us answers, probabilistic but not definitive, answers nonetheless. What it doesn't give us is meaning, and most of the time that's fine. Nobody wants a gradient boosting model to reflect on the nature of free will. I sure don't. But at a certain point, it becomes hard to ignore that most of what we're modeling are symptoms of systemic dysfunction. Why are we trying to predict who will leave instead of making work less shitty? Why do we model click-throughs and engagement instead of asking why everyone is so numb to any sort of outreach? Why optimize recommendations when the platforms themselves cause epistemic erosion? And carpal tunnel. These are problems that arise when the system itself is alienating, and instead of making the system better, we build a model on top of the symptoms, and then we call it intelligence. It is technically, but it's also a very expensive way of saying we understand why this is broken, but fixing it would be harder than predicting it, so let's just forecast the collapse and offer a 14-day free trial. Machine learning in this way becomes the formalization of the absurd, brilliant at handling what is, but completely ignoring what should be. A mechanism for turning existential inertia into deliverables. Absurdism, and in my bastardized explanation of it, is the idea that the universe is indifferent to human meaning making, but that we keep making meaning anyway, because the alternative is despair. The absurd isn't the silence of the machine, but it's the fact that we keep asking it to speak. A well-trained model is a black-boxed oracle, very mystical, like a less impressive Nicolas Cage. You give it input, it gives you a prediction. With just enough mystery to seem impressive and just enough action items to seem real, and slightly fewer bees. Not the bees! Not the bees! The danger isn't that these systems are wrong, it's that they're believable. They reflect the patterns of the past and repackage them as the future, which works well until the past becomes untenable. See, patterns are just institutional memory rendered statistical, which is fine if you're optimizing shipping routes, but a lot more complicated if you're modeling human behavior in a world that's already exhausting itself. In a Camus novel, this would be the part where the protagonist stares into the desert, lights a cigarette, and says nothing for 3 pages. In a stand-up meeting, this is where someone says, looks like the model's stable, let's move to deployment. I'm someone, I literally said this yesterday. I guess that's better than saying business as usual for 5 straight weeks, which I also did. We are building systems that reinforce the status quo and then call it insight, not out of malice, but out of fatigue. The tragedy of the modern data scientist is that we've built oracles that will never ask questions. They just answer with such confidence that no one thinks to stop and say, wait. Perhaps the most absurd expression of the system is personalization. The most elegant betrayal of all. The algorithm tells you who you are. You like this kind of song. You probably enjoyed this 12-episode trauma spiral. You look like someone who buys 6-pack of frozen edamame on Thursdays. The last one's me, I did that yesterday. I should get my blood tested for hormonal imbalance. Spotify gives you 6 daily mixes. Netflix gives you a microgenre probably nobody else can see. TikTok tries to give your epileptic seizures in 3-second increments. It all feels tailored, special, yours. But what this really produces is a kind of algorithmic solipsism, a world organized entirely around your past behavior. Your identity becomes a data set. Your future becomes a projection. You're no longer a person in this world, you're a node in a recommendation graph. And the more you conform to your own patterns, the better the model performs. A statistical haze shaped like you, built from what you've already done. The more you interact with it, the more it loops. You become a feedback function, a character playing yourself forever. I think that's what being John Malkovich is about. Not sure. No. Wait, I'm thinking of Synecdoche, New York. Yeah, that's the one. It's possible, likely even, that millions of people are now slowly becoming more like the version of themselves the algorithm believes in. I never saw myself as the kind of guy who'd be into Olivia Rodrigo, but Spotify sure thought so, and now I know all the words to Vampire, and I'm not even mad about it. Oh, dear Wamp. The tragedy is that this feels like attention, like care, but it's just prediction. You are not your recommendations, but they are you, because personalization in every fiber of its concept is just depersonalization. The more interesting case is what happens when you haven't done anything yet. When you're new, fresh account, no watch history, no favorites, no past to refer to. In those first few seconds, the system performs what a pittier man would call a digital baptism. Not into freedom, but into averages. First, it assumes that you're normal, statistically speaking, of course. It gives you what everyone else seems to like, the most clicked, the most streamed, least divisive options on the platform. In those first moments, the system gives you a Bayesian prior, the best bet in the absence of data. You're not exactly the null hypothesis, but you're not far off from it. You're what happens when the machine doesn't know you yet and assumes you're probably boring. And that's just as sad as it sounds. If it knows a little more though, like age, location, sign-up method, device type, it gets more confident. It starts assigning you to clusters. You're 26, on an Android in Vancouver? Welcome to Cluster 5C. Here's a podcast about tech burnout, an anime with cute girls with redonkulous hecking melons doing redonkulous hecking things, and 5 playlists with POV, you're dying in the 1941 Battle of Moscow in that title. You haven't said anything yet, but the system's already decided what kind of person you're likely to be. And it begins offering back a life. Fragmented, rounded, personalized. You're not choosing your identity, you're being eased into it. And this is identity by implication, belonging by nearest neighbor algorithm. And then of course you begin to click. You pick a song that feels vaguely right. You skip a video, you linger too long on a headline. You look at the thumbnail like it seduced your mom and broke apart your family unit. These signals are absorbed, adjusted and weighted, and the system begins to build a vector that looks a lot like you. Come not as you are, but as you behave. Sorry, Cobain. And the better the model becomes, the more precise the imitation, until eventually the recommendations feel like recognition. Which they are, but only of the past. You feel seen, but not necessarily understood. But here's the trick beneath the wooden box. The algorithm doesn't care who you are. It only wants to know what you're likely to want next. Not why, just what. And in doing so, it quietly encourages consistency. Not growth, not contradiction, just repeatability. This is how the loop closes. You started as a statistical ghost and ended as a measurable construct. And if you're not careful, you begin to trust it more than your own uncertainty. Organizations love machine learning for the same reason they love buzzwords, jargon, and KPIs, and the annoying ass shit on LinkedIn. You know the ones, my wife left me for my boss and here's what it taught me about B2B sales. It makes complexity legible, and legibility reduces accountability. If a human makes a bad decision, you can blame them, fire them, write a Medium post about hard lessons learned in leadership, post a video of you crying after laying off half your company. It's so hard, man. It's so hard. If a model does make a bad decision, you blame the data, the labeling. Just don't blame the organization because, hey, the algorithm did it. This is why machine learning isn't just a tool, but an ideology, a way of pretending we're doing something deeply thoughtful when in fact we're automating the avoidance of thought. This is why executives love dashboards that say things like employee engagement up 0.02% because it means they don't have to talk to their employees or ask why the intern's crying in the washroom again. No. The model said morale's fine. The bar chart is green. She must just love the tile grout. You can feel the weightlessness in that, right? The way language detaches from consequence, the way the person disappears. Absurdism, in contrast, invites us to look at the silence in the face, to admit that there is no answer and then decide what to do anyway. To build, not because it will last, but because we are alive and capable of creating. The absurdist data scientist doesn't ask, does the model perform? They ask, why does this model exist at all? And if it shouldn't, they shut it down. Not me, of course. I still need a job to afford my anime figurine collecting addiction, so no, I wouldn't shut it down. I'm a good boy, I play ball. Maybe the goal isn't to escape absurdity, but to design around it, and practice machine learning with the kind of philosophical honesty. You don't have to be a Luddite, you don't have to reject all systems and go live in the forest licking moss off rocks and journaling about how the clouds are mesmerizing today. You can still build things, but you have to accept the trade. No system will ever give you meaning. No model will ever whisper in your ear, you matter. At best, it'll print out standard error under 0.05, and you'll get hard for reasons you don't understand. We don't have to outright reject systems, but accept that they can't provide meaning, that no amount of logic will satisfy the human need for why. We need to acknowledge that every model is a frozen hypothesis about the world, that every prediction is a guess based on shadows, that no algorithm will ever care, but we still can. Maybe we design systems not just to optimize, but to reveal the absurdity that they encode. The absurdist data scientist says, okay, fuck it. If I'm going to build a model, I'll also build a warning label. Include error bars that say, this won't save you, see, these traits ain't what they used to be. And I'm so bad at impressions. A shortened model that includes a burnout score but flags it in bright red. A recommender system that periodically throws in a movie you'd hate just to remind you that you're not trapped, you're not a prisoner, you can still walk away, you're not the sum of your clicks. Honestly, you might actually hate Dune, and that's fine. I think Netflix already does this, because every time they recommend Emily in Paris, I feel like the algorithm's trying to neg me into therapy. A chatbot that replies, shut the fuck up man, just go talk to your dad like a man. Not everything needs to be useful. Some systems should be aware of their own futility. That too is data. That too is design. At the end of the myth of Sisyphus, Camus says that we must imagine him happy. Imagine pushing a fucking boulder up a hill for eternity and then someone with a fat blunt and a philosophy degree goes, yeah, but like, what if he's chill about it? That's the point. He's happy. Not because the task makes sense, but because he accepts its absurdity and persists anyway. Because even in futility, there's a kind of defiance. Maybe that's where we are now, pushing data up the hill. We do it because it beats lying down. Because it's easier than quitting. Because somewhere buried under all the regression coefficients and job requirements for AI evangelists too, there's still a flicker of care. Or maybe we just like the aesthetics of it. Maybe there's something sexy about suffering without syntax errors. At least that's how I feel watching data scientists deploy another classifier on a problem that didn't need one, or retraining a model on last quarter's slightly better version of the same pain. How I feel watching friends scroll through algorithms that know them better than the people around them, better than me. I never would have imagined that my best buddy is so into women's beach volleyball. Should I get him tickets? The system isn't listening, but we keep speaking into it. And maybe, let's not surrender, maybe that's the work.